Good morning, Institute of Clinical Excellence. My name is Dustin Jones. I teach modern management of the older adult with Christina Previtt. Today's Jerry on Ice. It's Wednesday, and today I wanted to talk about a very common topic, something that we probably all think about, probably struggle with, something that I think if we can think through this and tinker a little bit and just try some different things, that we can ultimately progress our confidence in our patients. So today kind of stems from a blog post from Talus Media. So I'm going to read the title here. Jason Colenso, who is a PTA, wrote a blog post that says, "Things I learned on social media about physical therapy in 2018. Which, man, that list could go on and on. But the number one thing that he learned, it says, there are 3 billing codes in physical therapy: Therex, therapeutic activity or education, and deadlifting. And I thought that was really funny because I feel on this, on PT on Ice, the deadlift is talked about at least once or twice a week, at least, and probably in every ice course. We talk a lot about deadlifting. A lot of us deadlift, whether it's with a kettlebell or a barbell or something along those lines. I know, Jeff is talking about deadlifting a lot in his lumbar management course. So deadlifting is definitely a common thing that we're talking about. And it's all great. We talk in these theoreticals. We'll do a particular manipulation with the patient or take them through, some type of exercise, reduce their pain, and we're going to start to load them, and then we're going to go right into deadlifting. And that sounds great. But then when we get to the clinic on Monday, it may not go as planned, or we may be scared to death to do something like that. I know that's how I feel a lot of the times. And I know a lot of you all are concerned about deadlifting with your patients. It can be very intimidating. But I want just to talk about a common scenario or common thing that we can do to really progress our patients and load them in a healthy and a safe manner, because we don't have to start with some of the riskier exercises that we commonly talk about here, like the deadlift or even a loaded squat, but we can scale things. And I want to remind you all about the risk versus reward quadrant that Christina talked about. I think it was maybe a couple months ago, how, especially when working with older adults, we want to think about, what's the reward that we're going to get out of this exercise, and what is the risk of the exercise. And that's a constant balancing act that we're thinking about when we're prescribing, our intervention. So we have the low risk exercises, but they may also have the low reward exercise, or low reward in terms of their benefit. We have the high risk exercises that may have a low reward. We have the low risk exercises that do have a high reward or a lot of bang for your buck. And then we have some of the higher risk exercises, but then definitely have a high reward. And with a lot of our patients, the deadlift will fall into that. But I want you to think in that low risk, high reward quadrant. Okay, so you get a lot of bang for your buck, but there's not a lot of risk involved. And one of those exercises that I feel is going to fit in that quadrant really well with a lot of our patients is the loaded carry. So if you're in the fitness world, if you're a CrossFitter, if you're in most fitness domains, you're going to hear about a loaded carry or a farmer's carry, farmer's walk. There's all kinds of different terminologies used for it. But you're basically picking up a heavy weight and moving from point A to point B. Very simple activity. But if you've ever done a heavy loaded carry, it's not necessarily simple. It can be rather complex, but you get a great benefit from that, from the strength standpoint, from the conditioning standpoint as well. And in my line of work in home health PT, the loaded carry has been a great kind of doorway into really starting to load people with a deadlift type pattern or a squat pattern, that people aren't as intimidated by it, and they're typically willing to start with that. So let's talk about a few things. So why a loaded carry? I'm going to pull up some of these notes here. So I think the big thing in terms of why a loaded carry is that it's a familiar movement. It's not this new novel movement to where someone may be only moving from their hips, maintaining some type of neutral spine to pick something up off the ground. Even though people may be picking stuff off the ground all the time, but they may not be thinking about that in terms of the deadlift pattern. That may be new or novel to them, which can be intimidating. But people get groceries out of their car and walk into their kitchen almost every other day. So it's a very common movement. It's familiar, and you loading something more than what they already load is not as intimidating for a lot of people. And I've found that to be true with a lot of my older adults. A lot of my 80-some-year-old women that have osteoporosis and a history of vertebral fractures, deadlifting, they're really concerned about that. Bending forward, there's a lot of fear involved with that movement. But I can hand them a heavy grocery bag filled with a bunch of cans of beans, and that's going to be something they're going to be willing to do. So just the familiarity of the movement is a big key that we need to consider. I mentioned before that you get a lot of bang for your buck, low risk, high reward. It is a total body exercise. If you've ever done a heavy loaded carry, you will understand completely what I'm saying, that you are working every ounce of your being to try and have a tall, upright posture, to not fall to one side, and to move forward from point A to point B. It's very empowering. I know for a lot of my patients, they have these perceptions that they can only lift, maybe 10, 15, 20 pounds. If they have lifted weights, that's probably the most that they've lifted in terms of, a dumbbell or something like that. They just typically don't get to quantify a lot of the things that they are lifting. And when they can see that I can bring in a 35-pound kettlebell, for example, for a lot of my home health patients, and they can hold that and stand tall and be stable and not fall and not have any pain, that's a very empowering thing when they thought in their mind that they only could lift 10 pounds, for example. So we can use that as a tool to definitely build confidence with our patients. And then lastly, it's infinitely scalable. So Mitch and Zach and Alan in the CrossFit box are going to be using loaded carries. I saw Mitch did a partner WOD up in Michigan where there were two people carrying a loaded barbell as a partner carry, hundreds of pounds. And then I can do the same activity with my home health patients with a 35-pound kettlebell. Or I could take the patient that requires a walker to ambulate. I can do a static hold with a 35, 44-pound kettlebell. It's the same concept, but it's infinitely scalable for a lot of our patients, regardless of the setting, really. So that's something to consider, and something that we definitely want to have in our back pocket. So a couple tips before we kind of walk through some practical things is where do you want to start? And this is where I always default to the patient. We want to start where they're comfortable in terms of the amount of weight, and if they're going to pick it up off the ground. Almost all of my patients, we always start tall, so the weight I either hand to them or they pick up from a chair or some type of elevated surface, because there's a lot of fear involved with that hip hinge pattern, a deadlifting motion, if you will, picking something off the ground that's heavy. So we'll start tall so they don't have to do that. So that makes it a lot easier, but then the weight that they're comfortable with. And this is the thing that I think we need to acknowledge, is that when I look at my patients and I evaluate them and I assess them and I know that they're probably capable of holding a 53-pound kettlebell and maybe walking 20 feet, for example. But in their mind, they may be only at a point where they think they can only hold 10 pounds, like I mentioned before. And, we want to get them to the point where they know that they can handle, 53 pounds, for example. But when we start, we probably want to start where they're comfortable and they're willing. And that's a conversation that we need to have. We need to ask, hey, what do you think about this weight? If you see a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of hesitation, it's okay to bump it down. This is a marathon, not a sprint. We're going to work our way up, but you don't have to, go max effort day one. I think it's going to really help with your therapeutic alliance. So let me, for the podcasters, you'll probably want to watch the video for this section, but I'll do my best to talk through it. Okay, so safety is a big thing. So in my world, in the home health world, if I hand a 35-pound kettlebell to a lot of my patients, I'm not going to trust them one bit to not drop it. I'm going to have all my safety measures in place so nothing bad happens. I can prevent a lot with something as simple as a gait belt. So this is, I'm not holding a gait belt. It's at the assisted living facility where I work, the one that I usually use. It's just a regular belt. But let's say you have a gait belt or some type of strap in your clinic, in your trunk if you're a home health PT. This is going to be really helpful to ensure that person's grip does not fail and they drop the weight. And so what you can do, this is where I love using the kettlebell, because I can loop the belt around the handle, and when that patient is holding that weight to the side, I can be behind them, holding on to that belt. So if they drop it, I can guide it down. Typically, I'll use two belts. I'll use one around the waist, even if they're a pretty stable walker. And I'll do another gait belt around the weight as well. And that, for me, has given me the confidence to really do this activity with all kinds of different patients, regardless of their level of functional capacity. So safety first, and then from there, there's some patients that you may have that may still need hand support, like a walker, or something like a cane, or may not be ambulatory, but they can do some type of static standing. We can do a good strength and conditioning activity with a loaded carry or a static hold, even with people that aren't able to ambulate well or ambulate at all. And that's where something just holding on and just standing. And if you do try this with some of your patients, I want you to do one thing and try and have a pulse ox on the finger just to watch and see what their heart rate does. It's pretty interesting to see what something as simple as this can do for a lot of our patients. Well, so you can do a bilateral hold, you can do just a one-handed hold, you can even do a hold behind, whatever it may be, but you can do static holds that are going to be really helpful for a lot of our patients. And so from the static hold, we can progress to something more dynamic, and this is where we could do something as simple as some type of stepping activity, front to back. You can switch the weights. Typically we'll have some type of support, whether it's a countertop or parallel bars if you're lucky enough to have that. But you don't have to go from static all the way to walking. We can break it up and give patients a lot of confidence. And then we can do a loaded carry where we're walking from point A to point B. Now with the loaded carries, for a lot of our patients, a bilateral hold is going to feel a little better than a unilateral hold. And if you don't understand why, then I want you to try it so you can see for yourself. If you're picking up one weight, it definitely just pulls you into side bending. You have to control that, and the weight's going to try and pull you as you're ambulating. But if you equal it out with the same weight, a bilateral hold, it's going to feel a lot more comfortable, and you can really load it up, which is going to be helpful for your patients. So I'll typically start with a bilateral hold when I'm ambulating if the patient doesn't need some type of support when they're walking. And then from the bilateral, we can do an asymmetrical bilateral. So let's say, I've got the 53-pound here and the 35-pounder here, which, kind of makes me side bend to the side and I really have to stay up tall. That's a great one to do. And then you can also, progress to the unilateral. Now those are our farmer carries. All the ones I've done so far have been the weight down to the side. There's tons of different varieties that we can do. We can do the rack position with the kettlebell. You can do an overhead press, which I don't want to punch my fan above me. You can use different, types of weights. So I typically use kettlebells because they're pretty versatile. You can use a dumbbell. Like you could do a partner carry like Mitch did with a barbell. Trap bars are great. Sandbags, cast iron Dutch ovens. I don't care. You can use all kinds of different things to do this activity. So it's very versatile. You can really load people up. And when you practice this on your own, which I hope you'll do if you haven't tried, a lot of what I've noticed, a lot of PTs that have not been in the fitness world, when they start to do loaded carries, they may pick up 10, 15 pounds. A scrawny, skinny runner guy like me, 150-pound farmer carry is relatively light for me. If I pick up two, 70-pound kettlebells, so 140 pounds, that's not going to be that taxing. I'm not going to get that close to my max effort. So that's just to give you a little bit of perspective in terms of how much weight you are potentially capable of carrying. So, you can load it up, especially, if you're doing well, don't have any pain, you're pretty confident in yourself. Try to load it up and see what you can do, and you'll probably be surprised, as I was, just being the scrawny runner that I am. So try it out. Try it out for yourself. Don't be afraid to try it with your patients. It can be a very useful activity. Hopefully you got some good tips on how to scale it, where to start it, how to progress it. And if you have any questions about this stuff, feel free to hit me up. leave a comment on this Facebook post and we can chat about how to troubleshoot different scenarios with your patients. So that's the loaded carry. If you're afraid of loading, try the loaded carry. I think it will serve you and your patients well. So to wrap things up, I want to mention that today VICE is open. So from now until September 11th, Virtual ICE, the clinically focused virtual mentoring program that we have, every week there's a lecture from the ICE faculty where we give our best content, and we're able to interact with you, all the students, and troubleshoot cases, discuss particular questions, and really dive a little bit deeper into certain topics. It's $29.99 a month. You can cancel whenever, but it only opens every quarter. So from now until September 11th, you can check it out. Just go to ptonice.com, and then last but not least, the next cohort of Modern Management of the Older Adult, where we talk a lot about things that we just discussed and more in terms of how can we best serve older adults with the current evidence that we have. And it's great because it's a cohort. We get lots of people together and we can share ideas and go through different case scenarios. So it's an 8-week online course, starts September 23rd. So get on that. Check it out. Me and Christina Previtt, we've really enjoyed doing it so far, so we'd love for you to join. So all that stuff can be found at ptonice.com. Y'all have a lovely Wednesday.